Okay, working back on this Heister with the GM 4.3 Vortec with the electronic pressure regulator system from IMCO. So when I uploaded the first video on this, no start with the excessive fuel issue, there were a couple of comments that I received which are valid, and the comments were, is it really the excessive amount of fuel going in to the mixer or into the engine, to the intake, that is making this engine not start? And throughout the discussion, because like I said, even in the first video, I was not really familiar with this setup. So I know that this would be somewhat of a pressure regulator, but in my mind, is it controlling positive pressure or is it controlling negative pressure? Meaning to say, if this regulator, right, was supposed to be working like a Model J, which needs vacuum, right, to have an output of propane, then my thinking was this electronic pressure regulator was actually controlling the amount of vacuum that is communicated from the mixer to the regulator. And when I saw that the pressure was coming out of this, right, without vacuum from the mixer, and most often than not, most of the time, that would be already a faulty regulator, most of the time. And the concern was, this is coming from Forklift Frank, and I gotta give props to these guys, Forklift Frank and Forklift Tech 1, for giving me a lot of info on this. I can't thank you guys enough. And so the concern was, again, and he even showed me a video of it, that on the system, on the truck that he is working on, or worked on, there is positive pressure coming out of that regulator, and that truck is running. So it made me think twice. It's like, okay, so maybe it does need the positive pressure, and meaning to say that this pressure regulator is controlling positive pressure going into the mixer, not vacuum communicated to the regulator, meaning to say this is going to be like an injector. And so the question remained that why did it start the last time when I hooked up the bypass fuel system, which is a Model J and a VF lock-off, vacuum operated, right? And so we were thinking, okay, maybe because there was some leftover fuel that it just started, because remember, I killed it right away once it fired up. And so I was thinking, okay, maybe that was a false positive, meaning that because it was just leftover and I didn't give it enough time to run, that it was just running on the fumes that was left over from me cranking it. All right, so I'm doing this test again, and this time I hooked it up the same way. So I have my bypass fuel system right here again. Lock-up is disconnected, so this is not going to be of any concern. But this time I hooked up the water column gauge into the secondary chamber of this regulator. So my concern was that if there was no vacuum, if this is not opening up, this EPR, if this EPR was not opening up, then I'm losing fuel, then I wouldn't have vacuum communicated to this secondary chamber of this regulator. There's also a fact or a possibility that this EPR is stuck open. So if it's stuck open, then what would happen is, because this mixer is going to produce vacuum, and this is stuck open, it's just gonna go here, and the vacuum would always be communicated to my regulator, thereby producing a negative pressure and opening the secondary chamber. But if this is not operating and it's stuck closed, then I shouldn't be seeing any negative pressure going into the secondary chamber of my bypass regulator. So let's try it. And this time around, I'm not going to kill it right away. Right? I'm going to let it run for a bit just to make sure that it's not leftover fuel that is making it fire up and run. Okay. So I'm going to focus you on that pressure gauge, and let's see what happens when I crank it. Okay, pressure right there, running. Inches of water, a little needle play, that's okay. Make sure that my tank is open. It up. Okay. I mean, if it was just leftover fuel, then that would have died already. Right? So the possibility now is this regulator stuck open? So what I'm going to do next is I am going to open this up, connect it to this regulator, because this is producing positive pressure. So if this regulator is stuck open, then once I crank it, I should see pressure coming out of this side, which is coming out, going into the mixer. So that's what we're going to do next. Now, so I've taken the EPR off from the mixer, and I've connected my regulator, the original one, even my solenoid, the lock off. So we know that there's positive pressure coming out of that regulator, and the concern was, if this is an excessive fuel case, then the EPR might be stuck open, right? And you can see right now, take a peek at that. So that is the plunger right there, and right now it's partially open, right? Or I think it is. But what I'm thinking is, if that doesn't move when I'm cranking it, and all that pressure comes out this side, then it is going to be a stuck open valve, right? Or it might be losing control on this. Maybe control is not present, but I don't have a code. So for me that would be unlikely, but so let's look at right now. Key on. Okay, so it moved, so for sure control is present, right? So the action that it made was that it closed and then it opened again. But right now my lock off is not energized, so there's no pressure going into the EPR. So let's try cranking it. Okay, so this one is a weird one, right? Because as you can see, now it's starting to smell propane. So what happened is, when you started cranking it, the valve actually closed. And then at key off, that's when it actually opened up and released propane. I know you couldn't see propane, but I don't know if you heard it, like pushing out when I keyed it off. I'm gonna get it closer. Try again, key on. And you can hear that. That was the pressure escaping from the EPR when I keyed it off. So right now it doesn't make much sense that for sure it's not a stuck open valve. Control is present, it's there, the valve is opening and closing, but it seems right now that it's not opening when it should and it's not closing when it should, right? But one thing that I've proven right now is that it would run on an old school Model J, but it wouldn't start and run with this regulator that's originally in it. Alright, like I said, I'm not too familiar on how this system works, and right now I'm at a loss with this, right? Because I'm worried that if I order the part, because I held out on the part, I know on the last video I said I'm gonna order the part and get a video of the final fix, right? Just so that, okay, it's already fixed. And when the guys commented that and showed me the video on their system that has positive pressure on this, but it was on a working truck, so that made me like, okay, take a step back and say, okay, what did I do wrong? And that's why I was thinking, like I said earlier, that it might just be the leftover fuel, right? Because at key off, it would push out some propane. It might have been that and not actually my bypass system. But as you seen earlier, it started and it ran. If it was just leftover propane, then it wouldn't have ran for that long. So and plus the fact that you see that there was vacuum going in, right? There was vacuum going in to the secondary chamber, opening up that secondary valve on my regulator. So there's something weird about this, or there's just something that we don't understand, or I don't understand about this system. I'm still gonna try to find some answers for this, although that's one of the problems when you're working for an independent, is that information is not that readily available. That's why, you know, I am gonna give credit to Forklift Frank again and Forklift Tech 1 for providing me with such info, very important info. You know, that info alone, showing me the video that on his system it had a positive pressure coming out of the regulator, you know, saved me from buying a part, from ordering a part which is not cheap, right, and ending up the same way, right? So at least right now, I mean, we're still gonna spend time troubleshooting this, but let's see what happens.